Hello and welcome to the Radical Saturday podcast. I'm AJ1700s here with a very special guest I've been hinting at for a while. This is Dana Linett from earlyamericanhistoryauctions.com.
Well, thank you for your introduction. Just so your members know, if you watch the History Channel and you watch the cable TV show called Pawn Stars, Las Vegas pawn shop that takes in all kinds of interesting artifacts and sometimes historical pieces. I'm one of the experts that they call in, known as the Early American History expert for the show. And I've done over 30 episodes on Pawn Stars with Rick and Corey and Chumley. And I found it very fascinating. And I've done it long ago, season one, two, and three. So I helped to get them off the ground, and some of the more interesting episodes uh, are with myself and another friend of mine. His name is Sean Rich, who was their gun expert on the show. And we were tied back in, oh, probably 2012 for both having the highest single rated episode on cable television at that time when my friend Sean got to fire a Gatling gun, and everybody got all excited and loved that episode. And we tied when I did an episode with a what's called a broadside, which is a printed like wanted poster for the capture of John Wilkes Booth. And it's a very famous one in most history books. And it's the $100,000 reward broadside for the capture of John Wilkes Booth, who assassinated President Abraham Lincoln at Ford's Theater on April 14th of 1865. So it's been a lot of fun, and I'm happy to be here in this podcast with
AJ.
AJ.
Yeah, like I said, not going by real name. Uh, but yeah, going real zero to hero here with guests. Uh, but now for a segment on this podcast I like to call News from the Front. Uh, this was normally this was originally going to be about America's 250, but the Brits outdid us, so I changed it in the last minute. So what's basically been going on in UK politics is Nigel Farage over here has been accused of taking a bribe, or not bribe, just not disclosing payments. So he's under investigation, and he's trying to get ahead of the investigation by calling a by-election to basically make the people decide. Unfortunately for him, every other party uh, decided not to run. So instead of being him versus the establishment, the only other major person running is Lord Pinface, famous comedic joke politician, which, yeah, that sums up modern politics, alright.
Well, do you want to continue with the episode that you're interested in, talking about the turtle? The turtle is a submarine, a very special submarine. It was the first submarine used in warfare, conceived by an engineer from Connecticut by the name of David Bushnell. And David was extraordinary in the sense that he conceived using a basically a large wooden barrel type of a device where he could have some air enough to create um, time where he could maneuver a barrel underwater, also have um, water that could come in to lower the ship, and and also to get rid of the water when he wanted to raise the ship. So it was the first fighting submarine created during the American Revolutionary War, and it was actually used and was a successful trial, although because of one problem that they had, the attack itself did not succeed, but he was able to prove the technology and survive the first use of a submarine.
Now, as they say in the movies, uh, actually, no, I don't remember the. Anyways, let's start from the beginning. This is nope, this is Boston Harbor, and you are the growing uh, independence movement, and you got a problem, a British Navy-sized problem, exactly this big British Navy-sized problem. This is HMS Eagle, and you need it gone. How do you destroy a ship this big? A bomb. But how do you get a bomb to a ship in the middle of a harbor? Well, as point out at the very beginning, David Bushnell has an idea. And just like quantum computers are the most advanced piece of technology today, combining stuff from multiple fields, so was the turtle. So it's time for the return of an old friend, everyone's favorite knockoff Toodles in old-timey fashion to go over propulsion, armament, and navigation. And, well, I'll just spoil the Mystery Musketeer, actual combat experience.
Well, on September 6th of 1776, the screw propeller-driven submarine Turtle was commanded by Sergeant Ezra Lee of Connecticut, and he was a member of the Continental Army, and he had volunteered to use the Turtle as an attack vehicle on the British flagship, the biggest ship in the fleet in Boston Harbor, and it was the 64 gunship of the line, as mentioned, the HMS Eagle. It was moored actually in New York Harbor,
Whoops.
and the effort failed only because the Turtle's use of a boring machine, which is basically a drill that you would use by hand to screw and attach the bomb that they also had, a time bomb. It was so hard that they could not get the screw to attach to the ship. The wood was that hard, and the amount of pressure that they could get to get the screw turning into the wood just failed. And they only had a limited amount of time where they could attempt to attach it because they were running out of air. It was extremely hot and horrible, circumstances being in this little barrel, basically. And he was also trying to keep it in one place at one time in place so he could put the screw into the bottom of the ship. But it was unable to penetrate the Eagle's hull, in order to properly attach the timed explosive mine. The submarine turtle was lost while being transported aboard a sloop, and the sloop was discovered. A sloop is a sailing ship, basically, and they were trying to get it back aboard the ship, which launched it, and the sloop was discovered and sunk by British frigates while leaving near the village of Bloomingdale. Anybody know the name Bloomingdale currently? Think they started some shopping centers at some point. Realizing the turtle was impractical as a Navy weapon, Bushnell turned his attention to torpedoes as explosive devices, as they were then called. Today, a full-size model of David Bushnell's turtle is on display at the U.S. Navy Submarine Force Library and Museum in Groton, Connecticut, also known for it being a submarine um, uh, launch point.
I think there's also multiple reproduction turtles, like static display turtles, not just in Groton.
Well, again, in 1777, David Bushnell attempted to use a floating mine he tried again, to blow up the HMS Cerberus in Niantic Bay in Connecticut. Bushnell's mine struck a small tender boat near the Cerberus and detonated. So it killed 4 British sailors and destroyed the vessel. But unfortunately, because it was hitting the wrong vessel, the intended target was not sunk. The HMS Cerberus action in the American Revolutionary War,
Are you sure it's not Cerberus?
possibly Cerberus. I'm from Connecticut. I speak differently. In the American Revolutionary War, included its first duties to dispatch Generals William Howe and Henry Clinton and John Burgoyne at Boston after they arrived post battles of Lexington and Concord. It was the ship that brought all the generals across from England to Boston, and they then carried on the war from Boston in the Revolution. This attack also provided naval reinforcement at the Battle of Bunker Hill. The early torpedo attack by David Bushnell's newly developed powder keg timed torpedoes in 1777 was cutting-edge American naval history. And in 1778, he launched what became lauded as the Battle of the Kegs, which a series of mines were floated down the Delaware River to attack British ships anchored there, killing 2 curious young boys and alerting the British. And that attack, too, proved ineffectual. Now, one of the heroes that is, again, an unsung, unknown name, as well, not many people have even heard of David Bushnell, but Ezra Lee was an American who piloted the attack on the first attack, was born in Lyme, Connecticut, and in August 1776, he was selected by his brother-in-law, Brigadier General Samuel Holden Parsons, also of Lyme, Connecticut, as one of several volunteers to learn how to operate the Turtle, an early submarine that no one had ever heard of before or thought of before, invented by Saybrook, Connecticut, near Lyme, native David Bushnell. And when General George Washington himself authorized an attack on British Admiral Richard Howe's flagship, the HMS Eagle, then lying in New York Harbor, Lee was chosen to operate what they called that infernal machine. So he was very brave. He learned how to operate multiple things at the same time. It was very difficult for him to maneuver the turtle, to make it go vertical or submerge, and be successful in deploying its bomb at the same time. And it was amazing technology for the day. The driven propeller was tiny, and it used what's called the Archimedes screw in order to push water and cause propulsion of a very light amount to be able to move the ship. And directionally, there was a little rudder that he had to also handle manually at the same time in order to make any maneuvers whatsoever. It was really an incredible feat that he was able to accomplish what he did, even though it proved unsuccessful in its blowing up the Eagle. But it was really one of the most remarkable, heroic events in early American naval history.
Speaking on the propulsion a little bit more, that is the first category. Don't ask what's wrong here. I don't actually remember what's specifically wrong, but like Dana said, it was steered by a rudder, had a frontal propeller for propulsion along with a top vertical propeller. But what are these? This is 1776. We haven't heard of this before. Well, this is like you said, based off Archimedes' screw to throw water at water, and is one of the first documented uses of a propeller.
Not only that, but Bushnell's idea of using water as ballast for submerging and raising the turtle is still fundamentally in use in modern submarines, as is the screw propeller, which was used in the turtle. It turns out that while at Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut, Bushnell proved that gunpowder could be exploded underwater. He also made the first time bomb so he could get away from the attached bomb to the ship, in theory, so he didn't get killed, or whoever the pilot of the turtle was didn't die in the process. He combined all these ideas by building the turtle, which was designed to attack ships by attaching the time bomb to their hulls while using a hand-powered drill and ship auger to attach the bit to penetrate the holes and attach the bomb. So all this technology was unheard of previously, untested, and it was remarkable. David Bushnell is one of the unsung early heroes of the American Navy, and he should be regarded as one of the founding people when it comes to submarines and submarine technology, because he was.
Uh, all that stuff about revolutionary technologies, that's only about the first two Mauser tools. We haven't even gotten to navigation yet, which is it's a whole nother ordeal. But to talk about the weapons a bit more, I don't believe the weapon as shown here was form-fitting, but there was a screw on top that released the bomb and started the timer, which I want to talk a little bit more about. As a suicide attack isn't, let's say, becoming of the values of this growing nation. So first, how much gunpowder do you need to blow up a ship? 150 pounds will do. But how do you how do you ignite it? That's harder. But this advanced diagram right here, with a cutaway view of the bomb, does show you how. On a watertight sealed container, by basically just pushing the lid down really hard. Uh, in the container, there is a flintlock pistol, and on its grip and attached to its trigger is what was still a pretty new and rare piece of technology at the time, a pocket watch that could be set up to 12 hours. Uh, I don't actually know how they got to start after detaching, but once attached to the ship and released from the turtle, it would go for, I believe they specifically said half an hour, albeit you could make it longer or shorter. Once the time was up, it would then pull the trigger, fire the gun, and blow up the gunpowder, thus sinking the ship.
Well, what they didn't realize when they made the attack was that he thought that they could get and drill through a thin copper sheeting that was on the bottom of the ship. But it wouldn't have been a problem other than he likely tried to drill in the wrong place, possibly a metal rudder support or something of that nature instead of the actual wooden portion of the ship. Lee's unfamiliarity with the British vessel made him unable to keep the turtle stable enough to work the drill against the Eagle's hull. And when he attempted to spot another spot to use on the hull, he was unable to stay beneath the ship and eventually abandoned the attempt because of the Hudson and East Rivers merging, and the currents at this point were very strong and complex. The turtle would only be able to attack the ship moored here during a very short period of time when the incoming tide balanced the river currents. It's possible that during the attack the tide turned, as they would say, and Lee was unable to compensate for the swift current that he was up against. He released the keg of gunpowder when the British, in rowboats, attempted to pursue him. The British, suspecting some trick, then gave up the pursuit because they had never seen anything like the turtle before and had no idea what to expect. Lee landed after several hours in the water, and he actually received congratulations from General George Washington, who afterwards employed him on the Secret Service during the Revolutionary War. Lee made a similar attempt a short time afterwards with Bushnell's machine in an attempt to destroy a British frigate that we mentioned earlier that was laid outside the village of Bloomingdale. But he was discovered again and compelled to abandon that attack. The submarine turtle was soon after sunk by the British as it sat on its tender vessel at Fort Lee, New Jersey. Years later, in a letter to Thomas Jefferson, David Bushnell reported he had salvaged the turtle. Its final fate is still unknown, but a full-size model, again, was created based on his designs. And again, you could visit it because it's on display at the U.S. Navy Submarine Force at the museum in Groton, Connecticut.
Uh, Luckily, in the slideshow, we've gotten to something you haven't covered yet. How exactly did Ezra Lee navigate the turtle?
Well, there were a number of different devices that he had to use. He had a vertical screw for being able to try to raise the uh, turtle for raising and submerging, and using the pump that he had to do with his foot to put pressure and pump out water or to allow water to come in. He had a very unique, just little handle for a rudder to show the uh, direction that he wanted to try to use. And it's so small, it was very, very difficult to try to counter any currents that he was up against, as I mentioned earlier. And the propeller, this little Archimedes screw, was very small and was exhausting to turn and be able to get any kind of propulsion from it. There was no mechanical or power source other than his own arms and legs in this ship.
Even by the time of the Civil War, another very similar submarine was operated by hand. Wouldn't really be until the First World War where you get non-human powered submarines. But first off, we got a view of the outside where there are portholes for, or not portholes, actually, yeah, they would be portholes for surface navigations, and a snorkel to get in air without having to open the hatch.
Many of the technologies that he designed in the 1770s are fundamentally still used today, but just highly, highly advanced. And
Not hand operated.
not hand operated anymore. And he would be amazed today to see even the World War II vintage submarines, World War I vintage submarines, and never mind the nuclear submarines that are stationed at Groton, Connecticut, and elsewhere.
Uh, but to go a little bit more into navigation, of course, there is the uh, valve to actually blow water in that you mentioned earlier, along with several hand pumps to get the water out, which must have been very tiring if you've ever had to use a hand pump before. But now to something you haven't actually touched on yet. It's navigation. Uh, so if you've ever read a travel guide to Puerto Rico, you've probably heard about their famous bioluminescent beaches. And this would get you on the right track to figuring out how they navigated, as when you're several feet underwater, you generally aren't able to get outside light. This is the bioluminescent foxfire fungus that was put on the exactly two instruments they had for navigation, a compass and I'm pretty sure it's not a mercury barometer, but a barometer with foxfire fungus, I believe, on the cork and at the lines every fathom, aka 6 feet. So if it was at the first fathom, or first line, that means you'd be 6 feet under the water.
That itself was a unique technology that they developed at that time. And it was astounding that they could gauge how much depth they were at and directional navigation using the compass and being able to see, because remember, there are no lights inside the turtle.
Besides the very tiny bit of foxfire fungus on the instruments. But that's it. That's all you get.
No electricity, no power, only human power, and what ingenious devices they could create for the technology of the day. And it was an astounding feat that it worked.
Yeah. Uh, but as we've talked about earlier, how did this battle go? Well, on attempt one, it did something. Maybe a steel beam, maybe it was just on the wrong area. Who knows? And on attempt two, the whaling ship got ahead. We don't talk about attempt two, but what if it did work? What if it did sink HMS Eagle?
Well, I think that if it had sunk the HMS Eagle, the flagship that brought all the generals from the British Army to America, it would have literally, let's say, freaked them out. And that may have shortened the war considerably if the British thought that they could not properly defend their major warships against other attacks, damage, and or total destruction by sinking by use of such a device in lieu of fighting ships of the line that ultimately were provided by France and helped at the siege of Yorktown to chase off the British fighting ships and gave the British no method of escape, causing their surrender and causing the end of the Revolutionary War ultimately. David Bushnell, by the way, was given a position by George Washington as commander and the head of what's called the Corps of Sappers and Miners. And that was the way of creating the fighting combat engineers of the American Army. David Bushnell was in charge of the first combat engineer unit in the American Army. And when they were at Yorktown, they did see service because there was many opportunities to blow up various positions of the British and to create trenches and be able to move closer and closer with armaments to bombard the town of Yorktown and the British who were entrenched there. So he was very important right up to the end of the war.
Uh, Going back, because I mainly want to use that, if it did sink, the war could have ended earlier, definitely there would probably be mass producing turtles. Uh, but who knows? Maybe there would have been an unconventional naval arms race in the 17th century, like there was at the beginning of the 19th, with the rise of submarines and aircraft carriers basically at the exact same time.
Well, even, in this technology and certain portions of it were used. Everybody's familiar with the Monitor and the Merrimack during the Civil War, that were also based on the fundamentals that David Bushnell used in the Turtle. They were just more massive and heavier armed and
Above water.
mostly above water, yes, but they were armored and they could withstand bombardment and get close to the wooden ships, and they were fearsome adversaries to the Confederate Navy. And then the Confederate Navy started to build some of their own, such as the Merrimack.
Uh, yeah, I honestly don't have much to add besides there is a section on this podcast called Viewer Mail Time. If you have your viewer mail, please send it to radicalsaturdaypod@gmail.com. We don't have any viewer mail, and I uh, doubt you're interested in any more personal anecdotes, so let's just skip straight to the ads. Are you too invested in seeing yourself from a few months ago to uh, even say something simple about them visiting your website, maybe buying a few things, or maybe hinting out what
Oh,
may be the next auction?
we've been in business at early American history auctions for many decades. Uh, I've published um, a couple of hundred major auction catalogs over that period of time. And we currently have a couple of auctions. One is online. We publish over Invaluable and our own website, which is www.earlyamerican.com, earlyamerican.com. And so you could always view our auctions. You could register to receive uh, notices and links to our upcoming auctions just by going to our website and filling out the registration and your email address. And you'll find that we have some really extraordinary items, very rare, but also we have lots of items that are very affordable, all authentic, and teach you American history. That's one of the guiding lights that I follow, and that's why I agreed to go on to the show Pawn Stars, is to bring people's attention to so many historical items that they had probably no concept that they exist, and to educate people more about American history. And so, whether it was a document by John Hancock, $100,000 reward broadside for the capture of John Wilkes Booth, spoon, hallmarked, and that means punched with the mark of Paul Revere, or other such items. I was very pleased to be able to get a worldwide audience to view these episodes, and I find myself speaking many different languages when I tie into something in Quebec or Vietnam or in Spain or Israel. Um, it's in virtually every language, over 100 different countries, and they keep repeating them. So you might be able to catch an episode or two, or you could go onto YouTube, where if you go to season 1, 2, or 3 of Pawn Stars and look for episodes with Dana, Dana, um, you'll find a lot of the 30 episodes that I worked on, and you'll learn a lot by watching TV. Anyway, it's a real pleasure to have the opportunity to join this podcast today and to once again help to bring some insight about American history and educate a little bit about the first and possibly most important naval uh, device and submarine used in warfare in the world during the American Revolution. So thank you.
Yeah. If you're curious about on my end where that uh vlog slash review video is, or where the next episode of Table One is, editing hell, that's where they are, which is why this is coming out first. Uh, but see you next time on the season finale of Radical Saturday, where we cover the Albonia Challenge.